Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. I'm Armando F. Sanchez. I'll be your host today. Very honored to bring back, and I say bring back because we did the show several years ago with a wonderful, wonderful author that I enjoyed talking to. I learned a great deal about it. He represents a perspective that I really enjoy about the Latino community, East Coast, West Coast, Cuban background, but I find so much similarities between what they experience and what we're going through over on the West Coast as well as Latinos. And I think the subject matter resonates not only between Latinos, but worldwide also the whole concept of coming to age. Raul Ramos y Sanchez, we're not related, but we should be, best of friends. And
Tocayos, yes.
Tocayos, you know. Let me share with you some of the recognitions of Raul Ramos and Sanchez. A very impressive list. Best Novel Award winner, International Latino Book Awards, Violet Crown Award, fiction finalist, Writers League of Texas, Books into Movies Award winner, presented by Edward James Olmos, USA Today Summer Reading Author, Latina Magazine 10 Hottest Summer Read Author, named number 1, 2011 Top 10 Latino Authors by LatinoStories.com, listed among Best Latino Hispanic Writers in the 21st Century by chacha.com, and featured author Ohio Ana Book Festival. So let me highlight some of his previous books, which I happen to have. America Libre, House Divided, that shows you that I really enjoy his books. And Pancho Land, I also have that as well. So I just have the trilogy here. And now we add a fourth book, The Skinney Years. I hope you can see it. I just received it and I've already read it. So I want to thank you for that. Thank you for that. Thank you for being on our program as a wonderful author, very established, very always productive in the idea that when we talk, I always find you doing a new project. And this obviously here now highlights something that we all need to reflect on. And I love your book, and I think it should be read by everyone, especially also youth as well. So tell us about your book. What motivated you to write this particular book, The Skinney Years?
Well, you know, my first book was America Libre, which is a story of the first part of the trilogy. And that is a very big picture series, a trilogy, which dealt with a lot of social issues, a lot of how the toxic debate around immigration could have a very, very negative outcome. When I finished that series, I wanted to sort of go into another direction for a while. And so I went back to my own youth and explored the world around me as I was growing up, what it was like to be a Latino at a time when there wasn't even such a thing as a Latino. I mean, when I was growing into my high school era, there wasn't even such a category. I mean, we were simply Cubans and Puerto Ricans, primarily Miami, some Dominicans. And growing up in Miami, we also had an African-American, very strong African-American culture, and then of course the mainstream Anglo culture as well. And we were all stirred up in that pot. And it was a very, for a time, quite a bit of a stew. But then eventually it became a patchwork and everybody started sorting themselves out. But in those years, it was really an amazing experience to go through that. We had a huge Jewish community in Miami Beach. We had of course, you know, all of the Latino nationalities as well. And so growing up in that environment led to some very, very interesting and you know, I think experiences which young people today could relate to, because we tend to think as young people that the world is new for us, and it is. But at the same time, there are people who have come before that have had their own variations of what you're going through. And I think some young people would find this book really interesting to see that 50 years ago, you know, we were seeing some of the very same things that we're seeing today. Same old song with a different beat, but a Latino beat at that. So
and now a little, maybe salsa, maybe something else, but it's still sort of music and sort of the genre is still there.
Yes, yes. So this gave me a chance to do something much more intimate. Now the story is not about me, but it is about real people in the environment I grew up in, and I fictionalized it to make it more interesting story, to make it hold together, and I patched together characters, you know, a little bit from this person, a little bit from that person. Fiction. In other words, it's fiction. Right? That's what all authors do.
But it's based on a lot of experiences that I'm sure you had.
Very much so. Yeah, there are personal experiences that I had in the book, and the fun part about this book was that it gave me a chance to put humor in the stories, because, you know, Latino is also laughter. I mean, you know, we deal with difficulty by making jokes and, you know, laughing about things. Even if 1 minute you're crying, the next minute you're going to be laughing, or the 1 minute you're laughing, the next minute you're going to be crying. But it's always, all those emotions are right there. And I tried to put that into the book as well, which, again, with the trilogy, there wasn't much room for humor in that. And so this was very refreshing to write, not only with humor, but also with more wordplay and style. Because again, when you're writing, as I wrote with the trilogy, it was a very taut, plot-driven story. You needed to keep the focus on the characters and on the action and on plot. This kind of story lets you open a little bit. It gives you some room to ramble around a little bit and explore idiosyncrasies and things like that. And so there were some events, you know, I think if you remember the scene in and I don't think I'll give any plot away, but there was an instance in which a little kid from Georgia had never seen a swimming pool before. And this is a real experience that I had. He was over at a neighbor's house, and he came out of their house running in his underwear, jumps right into the deep end of the pool, and then realizes he doesn't know how to swim. And so it was a combination, the mother of the family and I jumped into the pool, we pulled him out. And the first thing the kid says is, you know something? You can't breathe underwater. You know, it's things like that you never forget. I mean, you know, you just never forget experiences like that. And so I had to put that in the book. You know, it just,
well, I mean,
kind of thing.
It's realistic. It's realistic. It adds that dynamic. As clear as we may think, you know, in our youth, and how many things there are to appreciate that we've never really quite seen. That someone, like you say, who has a pool, okay, everybody swims. You never think about somebody who's never done that. Or how many people have never seen the ocean in real life? I mean, I come to think of it being that we're talking about Miami and Florida and that area.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because when I moved to Ohio in the late 60s, it took me a couple of years to realize that I couldn't get in a car and go to the ocean anymore. I mean, it was so much a part of my life growing up that I could be with the ocean within, you know, a drive, that was like, wait a minute, I've got 700 miles to get to the nearest ocean. This was quite a shock to be this far landlocked, you know. So and that was part of the experience too.
And then you see that little white stuff fall out of the sky, and you say, "What is this stuff?
What is this?" Yeah. Oh, when my face went numb for the first time outside, I was like, "What? Oh, I'm dying! I'm dying!" Because I hadn't never been any place that cold before. I couldn't feel my face. I thought this was the first thing that happens before you die of you know, freezing to death. I mean, that was quite a shock for me as well.
That's what I'm saying. So the contrast of going from heat to cold and vice versa, and you blend in this whole idea. You know, as I was reading your story through the process, is that sometimes I forgot totally that you were talking about a Cuban community. I thought, you know, it's like Latinos, mamá, tíos, tías, you know, the idiosyncrasies, la abuelita, you know, running and putting on ideas in people's head, like everybody's staring like, wow, where's she coming from? But she's old school, but you know, she's still connecting all of us, etc. The la comida, etc. And it just went on and on and on. And at the same time, it made me sort of compare and contrast. There are differences, but there are also very common denominators in our Latino community.
Well, I know one particular reviewer, a friend of mine that I made in one of my California tours, Jesse Luna, who lives in Pasadena, and he wrote a review and he said, it was great to see the West Coast, he was the West Coast, and he said it was great to read about the East Coast immigration experience. That for him, it was really quite a thing. And of course, the other thing that's different about Cuban immigration is that because of the differences in our history, we also have Cubans that are Afro-Cubans as well. Not a lot of them came initially in the immigration in Miami, but I remember having a conversation with a journalist from California, Latino, Mexican-American background. And he says, if I told the guys in the barrio that there are black Latinos, their heads would explode. But in this book, you learn that in Cuba, there are people of all different colors. And it's because of the history that there were slaves in the Caribbean that were brought in and replaced a lot of the indigenous laborers who had died. And so Cuba's blend of ethnicity and race includes Afro-American or Afro-Cubans as well. So I tried to include that as well. And then for me, as it was the shock as a kid, and I put it in the book, was the differences in treatment. Not that there wasn't prejudice or that there wasn't a difference, but how vehement and how hard those lines were dividing in that. And there was an incident in the book that I wrote in there the first time, and it was an exact experience that I had going into a supermarket and seeing a black family in their Sunday best, sitting down, the lady with the white gloves and her little hat, and they wouldn't wait on them. They just refused. They pretended they were invisible. And they finally got up and left. And I was astonished that this kind of thing would happen. But there it was, and that was one of the experiences that I wanted to put into the book as well. So that, we could relate that all of us have our different backgrounds and we all have our different crosses to bear. And I wound up going to a high school, which had a lot of African Americans, and I'm still in touch with my alum. I've been in my class reunions and stuff. And one of the reviewers from my high school said it was very insightful for her to see, what her Cuban classmates had gone through, because in all the years that we went to school together, she'd never really known about what our experiences were like. So it was great to hear an African American describe and say, gosh, I got something out of this as well. And so I was very touched by that.
I want to sort of link this to the Mexico area, because that's where I was raised. One of them is that Mexico had slavery also. It didn't last very long. We still have people that came that are African Mexicans, and they're called Mexicans. They're not distinguished, especially along Veracruz in that area.
Veracruz, yeah.
And so we have them also. The other thing is that I find very similar, that I always try to remember how many Mexicans ended up in the United States during the Mexican Revolution, 1930s, etc. And that the imposition of Castro coming into Cuba, also people leaving and fleeing for their lives as well. So it may be the different time zone, different era, but the emphasis of leaving a home that you didn't want to leave, you were forced to leave. You were in danger if you didn't leave. So we share that a lot in common, even though it's at 2 points of the nation, but we share that in common.
Well, and not just us. I mean, there were a lot of Jews from Russia who fled the persecution by the Cossacks. They had people from all over Europe that were leaving, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Potato famines drove a lot of the, Irish here. It's so even within Latinos, we're not alone. We are a nation of immigrants, and most people have come here for a better life, and also because the conditions where they were difficult, and they wanted to do something different. They wanted to have a better life somewhere else.
And let me also add to that, if I can piggyback, the idea that also a lot of people from different parts of Europe came to United States and Mexico and other parts of the country during the Inquisition. And
you're right.
So there's a lot of commonalities. As we go back in our own history, we find that, there's parallels. And like you said, there's Jews, there's Russians, there's Germans in Mexico that came, in the 1800s for exactly the same reason. Not everybody came just to the United States.
Well,
I think we sort of widens our senses of understanding that.
Italians in Argentina are huge.
Yes.
I worked with a man, his name was Giardini, but he spoke Spanish. He didn't speak Italian because his family had emigrated from Italy to Argentina. And then he moved to the United States. So he could speak English, he could speak Spanish, but he couldn't speak Italian. So, it's like, or a Pope. What about the Pope, right? I mean, he's from an Italian family from Argentina as well.
Right.
And, it's very, we tend to think of this being the melting pot in the United States, but this whole hemisphere is really the melting pot, not just the United States. But of course, we tend to, think locally, and, with the media, there's not much reporting, but there's a lot of stereotyping that goes on in the media. I mean, it's very clear from the way that casting gets done in Hollywood. That surely reinforces a lot of stereotypes.
That's a major issue.
And so we wind up with people, people look at me when I was first came to Ohio, and even still today, they look at me and say, "You don't look Cuban." And I say, "Have you ever met any other Cubans?" Because, there's a lot of Cubans that look like me. And there's a lot of Cubans that if you saw them on the street, you think they might, belong in inner city Detroit, So it's like,
yeah,
you have people that have preconceptions of what a Latino should look like. And that's also another thing that is gradually changing, but it's still a long ways to go before we realize that as well.
I can see your book again in the classrooms being read by youth and having that discussion as we're having it here, opening up that involvement for persons to have that discussion, to realize that there is not one culture, one dominant perspective, and everyone else is fighting its way up the ladder. It's not that. It's
right.
English language has words across the board of worldwide, but it's not limited only to the United States.
Another thing I think is worth noting is the period piece aspect of this, which I think a lot of people can relate to as well. This was the time of the Cold War. It was the height of the Cold War. And of course, South Florida and Cuba were very, very prominent in that, but really everywhere across the United States, people were terrified of the bomb. Those were the days when, we had the missiles of October and, the Berlin Wall and a lot of other tension. And then following that, then we got into the whole civil rights movement, which again, this book touches on that aspect as well of the civil rights movement for African Americans. And then finally, the youth counterculture, which began the whole long-haired, hippies and all of that kind of stuff. And so the story, the setting for the story is really this very rich mixture of, culture and youth movement and civil rights and, the whole thing kind of coming together in a very unique place. So I think there's a lot for young people to see about the period that I think they would enjoy as well. And also, more mature folks kind of looking back on it and seeing the now generation from a Latino perspective, because, we were hippies too, and so we had our own brand of the whole flower child experience and how that took place in this very textured environment.
And when you're saying all these dynamics that are pushing and pulling society, right in the middle of this is also the Vietnam War.
Yes.
That was
absolutely true.
That pushed
drove
many of us. That drove
Yeah.
a lot of families and men to change their dynamics of thinking, and it was just, wow, what a period of time. I know that your book goes from 1958 to 1971, so that 23-year span. You don't go like a history book. You're sort of bits and pieces. That's what I got from your book. So you allow people to sort of, I don't know about this, so go do research, learn more about it. So I could see this. Now, we're running short on time here on the show. I mean, we could do this for hours, but I want to make sure that our viewers, our listeners also have access to a website where they can get a hold of you, where they can find out more of your speaking engagements in the near future. Please, can you give us a contact information?
Sure. My website is raulramos.com, RAULRAMOS.com. And it has information on all of the books, upcoming appearances, as well as some background on different topics that are covered in the book. So please, feel free to go and check it out. I have plans coming up at the end of this year. I'm going to be in South Florida because that's the setting for the book. And I'm also working that out in my third trip to Cuba in the last 3 years. That's kind of an interesting, quick little side story.
Yes.
I had been out of touch with my Cuban family for almost 50 years to the day. And we established email contact first. And then it took me 2 years before I could actually get down there to visit in 2013. And then I was down there again in 2015, and I'll be there again at the end of this year. So I'll be making my third trip to see my family, and it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life to be able to see family that I had not seen in 50 years. It was just a phenomenal experience. So that part, that I'm rolling that in as part of my trip to Cuba, when I'm in South Florida. So I'll be doing some appearances down there as well.
Now, is there any coincidence that you're going down to Florida in December and you're going to miss the Ohio winter?
Well, the last two trips we made to Cuba were in July and in April. My wife says, you will never take me there in the summer again. So they have a saying, one of my cousins said, it's so hot the devil was walking down the street with an umbrella. So that was
that's cute. I never heard that one before.
Yeah.
That's cute.
El diablo con una sombrilla. That's what we call it.
It's hot. Yeah. I've been in the Caribbean in the summer. It's like, oh, heaven help me. Oh, man. I don't enjoy that. Please give us your contact information one more time, please.
Sure. RaulRamos.com, RaulRamos.com. And you have contact. They can contact me there directly. There's a form to get in touch. My email is there as well, and the information about the books and where they're available and where I'll be, all at RaulRamos.com. And
if classrooms, individuals are reading your book, The Skinney Years, and it's not a diet book. It's Skinney Years. The idea is that people can contact you, ask you more questions about it. And
absolutely.
Students, we invite the students to write you questions about the book, and that
sure.
Make them aware that the authors are accessible. They do want
absolutely.
you to look insights into books. So, as a retired teacher, please let your classrooms and your students contact the authors, and they're more than happy to answer and respond.
We are absolutely. You spend so much time as an author writing by yourself. It's a very lonely craft. That when people reach out and say, "Oh, I read this," and it's just like, yes, okay, I got through to somebody. So it's wonderful. Yeah, we really appreciate hearing.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with a wonderful author, and someone I'd like to call my friend as well. We've never physically met. We've always met either internet or digitally or by phone, and it's always been a great time to talk to you. And Raul Ramos y Sanchez, this newest book, The Skinney Years, and I hope you write many more. I mean, it's just a great book, so please pick it up. I didn't ask you that question. Where can persons find the book?
Well, it is available. The primary vehicles for it are online. It's also available through local bookstores. And if you go to my website, RaulRamos.com, there is a place where you can find the local bookstore near you that carries the book.
Excellent. And as we're ready to sign off, any closing words on your behalf?
Well, just that I would love to hear from young people, readers. It would be wonderful any questions that you have, I would be more than happy to answer. I was very fortunate that I grew up next door neighbor was a person who was an author. And it was very inspirational for me to know that someone could do that, make a living from it, and that it was a real thing. And so if I could ever be a mentor or help some young person to become inspired, I would be always happy to do that.
Well, I hope that we can change that from one person to add an S, make it plural, and that
sure.
Students around the world can contact you and also learn more about the insights of your books, 4 of them that you have, and I'm sure you've done many small articles and presentations, and also the idea that you motivate people to find their ability to write. And I find that, everybody wants to be a writer, but not, there are barriers. And I know you've addressed that question as well. So anytime, any way we can help as well. So aplauso to your great work. And thank you for being a guest on our show. I'm very honored. And thank you, Raul, and keep writing.
Thank you, Armando, for the work that you do.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions about this show, please contact me at lsacnational@hotmail.com. Raul, thank you for being with our show. You have the phone to answer. You're a busy man, but you
I forgot myself.
Adios, Raul.
Adios.